All right, new episode of Jung Naiv. I have a new guest. Who are you?
Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory.
What is that? What is a special rapporteur?
Well, it's a title, it's a function that the UN has for independent experts who are chosen and asked by the Human Rights Council to report by virtue of their competence, of their commitment to human rights, of their particular knowledge on a given theme, right to food, right to water, freedom of expression, or on a given region, in my case, it's the occupied Palestinian territory, to document violations of international law taking place in that particular domain or country, and then report once a year to the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly. And then my work also includes receiving allegations of violations from victims, so taking individual cases to the competent authorities, and then taking any other actions that I deem necessary in the discharge of my mandate.
Why did you become that? Where did you take that job?
Yeah, good point. I've been asking the same question. I've been asking myself the same question a few times since the past 7 months, because it's very heavy mentally and from a humane point of view, it has become so.
Was it easier before October 7th?
It was not. No, it was not. It has never been easy, but now it's something else. And I can explain later. But I've always been, in the 1 year and a half that preceded, let's say it's the 7th of October, because, it's been the turning point in recent history that we still cannot process easily. And rightly so, for what it was and for what has happened after that day. But it has become really challenging for what I've seen. It's not that it was easy to monitor and document the violations that were taking place in the occupied Palestinian territory before the 7th of October. But the violence, the ugliness, and the abyss of humanity that I've seen since then, it's something that has sort of accelerated the aging process in me. This is what I feel. But however, why did I do so? Look, it's not something I've been thinking of for all my life. I was a lawyer who encountered Palestine. There was not an active research. It's not that I've ever been an activist in my life. So, there is something that happened to a person who grew up like me in a country like Italy 40, 35 years ago, where Palestine was very prominent in the public debate. And Italy used to play another more mature role in foreign affairs, I would say. But however, Palestine was very heartfelt to many. There was a lot of discussion about Palestine without ever antagonizing Israel, but just expecting that Israel behaved in line with international law. Back then, it seemed possible to expect that. So I grew up in that environment, and so I've always been exposed to Palestine as a known reality. Then when I was at university, there was the second Intifada, and it was very touching for my generation. And but then it was when I went to SOAS, then I realized that you can look at Palestine through the prism of international law, and particularly the critical race theory and the decolonization prism, and it looks even worse than is normally perceived in terms of injustice. Then I've worked for the United Nations for about a decade. I was, after the last 3 years of which were in Palestine, I left with a huge sense of frustration, and I had done. I said, basta. I don't want to deal with Palestine anymore. But
why?
Then, is it because I had never encountered apartheid. And I didn't have the antibodies that many Palestinians have, all Palestinians have. For me, it was so upsetting, so frustrating to be in an environment where where injustice is not it's structural, and there is really a difference of what you can do and what you cannot do based on who you are. And if you belong to a certain group, you are excluded. You are basically excluded from civil rights, and you are under martial law. And you realize what it is when you go there. Mm-hmm. Now I think there is also better understanding of these, like 15 years later. But then what happens is that I left Palestine. Palestine didn't leave me. I was in the US 2012, 2014. There were 2 wars. This is when I started also writing for some newspapers because I knew the reality on the ground very well, and it was a richness for others in the US that I had meanwhile encountered, like Jewish Voices for Peace, for example. And this is when I got persuaded by a former colleague of mine at UNRWA to write a book about Palestinian refugees in international law, which took me almost 5 years of my life. But it was a huge journey in terms of knowledge, understanding, digging into the archive of the question of Palestine. And this is when I was disseminating the book. It was COVID, so there were a lot of webinars, and people were excited about webinars, and so. This is when the former special rapporteurs heard me talking, and I said, I think you really could be a good candidate for that.
And you were like, no.
No, but Richard Falk, John Dugard, there was quite a prototype of special rapporteur in my eyes, in everyone's eyes.
Male, bald.
Yeah, male, bald, very wise, very wise. And soft-spoken. No, Richard Falk was not soft-spoken at all. But then, again, I had 1 year to think. And through that year, I was working, and I had done a number of things. I was teaching, and I was also leading a program called The Question of Palestine in the Middle East. I said, you know what, I could do this as a special rapporteur. I do have a vision of how things could be different. And then, yes, I threw my hat in it, and then there was a selection process with the Human Rights Council, and here I am.
So why do you think they gave you the job? I mean, there were obviously other applications, right? Like, why were they like, oh, Francesca needs to do this?
Yeah, I think that there was a mix of considerations, because I carried, so I had that scholarly background that is needed, because they've always they've never chosen, like other mandates, people were prominently human rights defenders. They've always chosen seasoned academics. So that book that I had written had created, it's still considered, not because it's my book, but it's considered a point of reference in the literature concerning Palestinian refugees in international law, and so there was that kind of competence. There was also the fact that I had worked with the United Nations, so I knew the United Nations pretty well, which is something. I'm sure that member states do take this into account, because a lot of us come into the system, which is pretty difficult to understand, and knowing how it works and being ready to what you have to deliver as a mandate holder, knowing the rules, make you better prepared to abide by a strict code of conduct. And then I also think that there was quite a lot of support from civil society, Palestinians, and also some Israeli organizations, which I knew, who had sort of engaged with, because there is a lot of this. It's an interactive process, the one that leads member states to choose to propose someone. This is what I think it happened.
Do you need to, for this job, do you need like competence only on Palestine or also on Israel?
Well, how can you disentangle the two? The occupied Palestinian territory. I also think that this mandate, as it is problematic, because it doesn't deal with the entirety of the Palestinian people. It doesn't deal with either Palestine or Israel as a whole. Now, as of 2021, while my mandate has been on for 32 years now, in 2021, the Human Rights Council also created a fact-finding mission with a very strong mandate to investigate, document, collect evidence, including for violations of international criminal law. So, and this commission has competence to look at root causes in both the occupied Palestinian territory, namely the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and Israel. So it has a more comprehensive mandate than I do. But now, after 2 years, I can in the beginning, I was wondering how we would go, how we would proceed together, whether we would overlap or clash. But it's very clear that we have two very different mandates. And with a greater attention that there is now from the international justice system, being the International Court of Justice, with the proceeding that South Africa started against Israel for the violation of the Genocide Convention, or being the International Criminal Court, this commission working as a permanent fact-finding body is fundamental. At the same time, my role is fundamental, and this is the advantage of someone who knows a lot about that place. Of course, it includes Israel, because Israel was created inside historical Palestine. So I have a pretty detailed knowledge of that. But I cannot carry out investigations in Israel. Many times over the past 2 years, I received requests from both former Israeli officials and others saying, "Well, you always talk about apartheid in the occupied Palestinian territory. Can you include, in your reflections, what happens inside Israel?" And I cannot, because I can refer to it as a general concept, but I cannot investigate what happens inside Israel.
Well, we're going to talk about all of that in the coming hours, I guess. So are you, as a UN Special Rapporteur, an employee of the United Nations?
No, I'm considered an expert on mission. So it's a high-ranking official, it's a very senior official, but it's unpaid. So this is a volunteer.
You don't get money?
No.
Well,
it's all for free.
The mandate is for 3 years, so you don't get paid for 3 years?
No, the mandate is for 6 years.
So 6 years.
Yes, I'm telling you, it's a huge sacrifice. But frankly,
how do you make
money? Because all of us have separate jobs. So I before becoming special rapporteur, I used to teach.
So it's a side job? Really?
Yeah, it should be. I'm telling you the real story here, because this is. In the beginning, I used to work part-time. I moved part-time I work with an organization of lawyers based in Jordan, but which has an outreach in the region. And now I'm responsible for the stateless refugee and migrant program. So it's an organization that provides legal aid, but I take care primarily of the research and advocacy part. And this is what I've been doing, plus teaching in various universities, either the question of Palestine or forced displacement. And then during the first year of this special rapporteurship, I decided to move part-time. And then as of October last year, I've been on a sabbatical. So I had to take a break from work. So it's fine, but I cannot do that forever. And this mandate cannot even fundraise. So it's very complicated. But I have a team of volunteers. I have the support of a number of universities.
Do they give you like a budget to work with? Like, okay, this is like, you got like 1 million euros a year to go. I don't know.
No way. No, there is no special.
No money at all?
No, there is
like
budget.
office space or something, or no.
No, but I don't need office space. I have an office at home and I travel a lot. But so what the budget includes is just covers my travels to the United Nations. So when I go to Geneva and New York to present my report, or for example, if there is an annual meeting of all special rapporteurs, we are 55 now, and it's a very, very interesting family. You really see the added value of having independent experts. Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of Kofi Annan, used to call the special rapporteurs the crown jewel of the UN system because of our independent eye and our independent voice. But yeah, other than this, we have budget to travel twice to the country or to do two visits. So, for example, thematic rapporteurs can choose two countries to visit each year, and I should be allowed to go to the occupied Palestinian territory, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip twice a year. This cannot happen because Israel.
They don't like you there.
No, they've not let special rapporteurs on the occupied Palestinian territory in since 2008, when Richard Falk went and was arrested. So Israel has never cooperated with the mandate. But
Do they have to? Do they have to comply?
Of course, as a UN member states, they have to. Even Afghanistan has let the special rapporteur on Afghanistan, which see the thing. So there are 14 special rapporteurs investigating violations of international law in a number of countries like CAR or Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Iran, and Afghanistan. Now, even Afghanistan, under the Taliban, allowed my colleague to enter, despite the fact that, of course, he was going there to document the government's violations. And this special rapporteur has even denounced the gender apartheid. So, of course, the Taliban are not happy. But still, I'm telling you, Iran doesn't allow the special rapporteur to come in. But the difference is that while many rapporteurs face a certain criticism by member states, what I face is monumental, because this is the only mandate that scrutinizes a country which is considered somewhat belonging to the Western community. And so, and there is also, and in fact, both Israel and the United States have never engaged with this mandate. Yeah.
So you would like to go?
I should go.
When was the last time you were there?
On a personal capacity, just before becoming a special rapporteur, meaning I was appointed officially in April 2022, and I started on the 1st of May. And the last time I went was in March 2022.
So what do you tell people like who just heard what you have done in your past before becoming a rapporteur, and they were like, well, she shouldn't do this since she's like an activist, obviously. Like she's been part of the Palestinian cause for many years. So why would we believe her on her work?
Yeah, but
she's an activist.
Yeah, but what does it mean being an activist? Because I think I'm a very committed. I'm a lawyer, and I'm very committed to human rights. This for sure. And I've never, but again, not because I despise activism, rather the contrary. I think it's great. It's just that I've never been an activist in the strict sense of the term. But as a lawyer,
you're a lawyer activist.
Richard Falk would call himself a militant jurist.
Ooh.
Yes. I mean, to an extent, yes.
Like a lawyer with a stick.
A lawyer with a clear sense of what international law means in its universality. And I do not like bullies, and I do not like double standards. This is something that is really me, I mean, as a person. So more than an activist, I'm someone who has zero tolerance for injustice. And it's in, I mean, if you knew me, and I mean, just as a friend, you would know that what I'm an activist on is environmental rights. This is the things, the issue, the file on which you can probably say she's an activist, because I have no professional dealing. But I've always engaged with the question of Palestine professionally, scholarly, from a civil society think tank point of view. I don't think that this qualifies as activism. Yeah. Yes, I'm someone who knows a lot, which is, I mean, you can see this as a strength or as a weakness. I also want to say I have nothing against the state of Israel other than expecting that Israel behaves in line with international law. like any other UN member states. And especially because there is so much support that comes from Western states. There are a lot of injustices, and there are a lot of countries who misbehave, who violate international law through and through. But find another case where there is so much support from Western countries who preach human rights and justice every single day. And look at what's happening today.
What were the reactions when you got the job? I can imagine there were like two points of view. On the one hand, they were like, "Yeah, she knows what she's talking about. Great to have her." And on the other side, I can imagine, she's an anti-Semite.
Yeah, it started very early on. It was very weird, very weird. You know, then I think and it's awful what I'm going to say, but you sort of develop a thick skin to be verbally abused all the time, and you almost don't feel it anymore. But the first times I was accused of being an anti-Semite, I was totally shocked, because this is really the last thing. It's not just about being an anti-Semite. It's like telling me that I'm racist or that I'm anti-Arab. I mean, this is really what I'm not. Because again, my goal in life is being a human rights person. So it was tough. And it started very early on, because in February 2022, when my name came out, there was a report. But it was a smearing of all the candidates that had been selected. All of us, apart from one who was totally unknown. I mean, everyone got, we got our deal, our share of insults and smears. But then, of course, with me, it became what they said, that I was an anti-Semite, because I wrote during the... this is the reason why I was called an anti-Semite, that in 2014, during the Gaza war, and that war was very painful, because there were 2,000 people killed, and there were former colleagues of mine who had been killed. And this high level of dehumanization, nothing compared to what we see today, but this high level of dehumanization of the Palestinians, this incapability of Western politicians, Western leaders, and Western media to differentiate between to really unpack the Israeli narrative, or these are human shields, this is just collateral damage. Because I had been in Gaza, and I knew Gaza, and I knew that while Hamas was there, and Hamas was certainly not beloved by the people. I mean, the period I used to go to Gaza was between 2010, end of 2012, so during the 3 years I was with UNRWA. I mean, seeing what they had done. So I expressed my criticism. I was spontaneously fundraising for UNRWA, and I used the term Jewish lobby. Which is... Do
you want me to quote you?
Yeah. Oh, you have it. Ooh, you're very prepared.
You posted an open letter on Facebook. It was during the Operation Protective Edge. There was the war in Gaza in 2014, and you wrote, quote, "America and Europe, one of them subjugated by the Jewish lobby and the other by the sense of guilt about the Holocaust, remain on the sidelines and continue to condemn the oppressed, the Palestinians, who defend themselves with only means they have, deranged missiles, instead of making Israel face its international law responsibilities."
Mm-hmm. And what is deeply wrong in that is that I should have said AIPAC. And because AIPAC, in fact, is primarily, there is a pro-Israel lobby, or I should have said pro-Israel lobby, because in fact it's not entirely Jewish. Mm-hmm. There are now more than ever, it's evident, what I've learned over the past 2 years, that many Jewish Americans and many Jewish people around the world are really against what Israel is doing and very ashamed of what is being done in their names. But so, of course, it's wrong. And I learned. This also shows how much... I'd also heard it from Israelis. And I also read this term, this way of qualifying AIPAC as, or the pro-Israel lobby as Jewish lobby. I mean, even on Israeli media, but there is something that it's clear is that as a non-Israeli or as a non-Jewish person, you cannot say that. But now...
It kind of reminds people of like this conspiracy theory of Jews controlling the world behind the scenes. And
which I knew nothing about, for example. I mean, I've often been asked, even during my investigations, whether certain questions, whether I would realize that there was a conspiracy theory. There has been so much conspiracy theory, but this is something interesting because over the past 2 years, what has helped me a lot has been really my contacts and my connection. And what I'm saying, it's proven. I mean, I'm not pulling the card of the Jewish friends to say, oh, I have Jewish... No, but it's something else. If you notice, if you go back to the attacks against me, among the most prominent voices in my defense, there have been Jewish scholars.
Yes, there were 65 scholars of anti-Semitism, Holocaust, and Jewish studies who denounced the escalating smear campaign against you.
Yeah, this was
right after the attacks.
Yes, but also Professor Avi Schleim wrote a wonderful letter that sometimes when I feel down, I go back and I read again. But I remember one of I had started engaging with Jewish scholars not because of that, because they called me as I became a special rapporteur to alert me about this IHRA. Are you not familiar? Well, there is some groups have pushed for a definition of anti-Semitism that has been promoted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And basically, there are a lot of things that can be said about that. But it basically equates or leads to conflate anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel and Israeli practices. Now, there might be criticism against Israel that might amount to anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is discriminating or expressing hatred against the Jews because they are Jews. I mean, this is the most basic thing. This is not what the IHRA does. I knew nothing about that. And then I started meeting with some of these scholars who were very worried about the fact that after so many countries adopting this definition of anti-Semitism, which is a way they were alerting me to suppress freedom of expression, to suppress freedom of assembly, to contain the right to protest. And indeed, look at what's happening today. I hope, Tilo, I hope we will have the chance to get there. But then I started educating myself, learning with them. And because there was a strong push, a strong lobby to make that definition adopted within the UN as well. So I started getting to know them. There were some Israelis, some other Jewish scholars, primarily of Holocaust studies, genocide, and Jewish studies. We became friends. And actually, when this big smear against me started, I was so taken aback. And I had a call with some of them who said, look, the words you chose were infelicitous. But we know who you are. You have to remember who you are. Don't get so affected by this, because this is what we were trying to tell you. This is how they use the allegation of anti-Semitism to silence everyone and everything. And literally, what one of them told me, is a dear friend now, and I said, they will mop the floor with your face as you start pedaling back. Just remember what you had in mind when you used that sentence, educate yourself, and try to make sure that, no, it doesn't happen. Try to see how deeply rooted still in our societies are some anti-Semitic tropes.
Right.
And this goes...
And like using Jewish lobby in the United States was kind of an anti-Semitic trope, right?
But I do understand now, because you know how many times in debates I hear people saying, oh, it's always them, it's always the Jews. And now I have, and again, it's not a way to protect myself and to say, oh, no, let me pick this up so it's clear. No, I really feel it. I say, oh my God, they really think they're all responsible. This generalization, this believing that everyone who's Jew is to respond for what Israel does is wrong. But I also explain it this way. Mm-hmm. I don't blame and I do not condemn any individual who has a strong love and who cannot individually criticize or get himself or herself detached from Israel. Because we need to understand where the Jewish people were at the end of, after the Holocaust. They kept on being discriminated. And there has been so little, I say that as an Italian, but there's been so little understanding, so little appreciation of what the Holocaust has been, because there is a lot of focus on the concentration camps, mm-hmm. which were awful. But how did we get there? How could it happen that in my own country, we signed the racial laws that 10 years before they started to be sent, innocent civilians started to be sent to the concentration camps, had been kicked out from universities, from their medical professions, from everything they had, because they were Jews, because they were perceived as a threat, and it was self-defense during Nazi fascism. So I see, and then because of this, when I hear this kind of arguments, it's the same when I say, oh, it's the Arabs. There is something so derogatory when you point your finger against an entire group. But when it comes to Israel, I say, because the Jews have been persecuted for centuries, they have this sense of commonality and the recognition with Israel that we cannot understand. There is something that, in as much as I try, I will never understand the sense of protection that many Jews feel, or many of them identify themselves as. So they can do whatever they like. Where I get really frustrated is with member states. They are not free. They have to abide by international law. They have to, in the face of serious violations, they cannot continue to protect and shelter Israel's impunity. They need to take action, but it's not individuals. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, but again, we as we grow older, we learn.
Another attack I found to be interesting, like on you, that you in December 2014, when the EU General Court took Hamas off its terror blacklist, you said something. Can I quote it?
Yeah.
You said, two good news, one after another from the radio while I was taking a nap, normalizations in the relations US-Cuba, and removal of Hamas from the list of terror organizations. Was I dreaming?
Yeah.
So you were, like, people think you're saying you're celebrating Hamas being taken off the terror list.
Yeah. Yes. No, I know. This comes across. And it's also very weird because I really have very little respect for Hamas as a political organization, but because of its bringing religion into a traditionally secular society as a political credo, and also because I've seen what Hamas has done to the Palestinian people in 2007 when they took over power in Gaza. I will never forget they were the ones going around shooting people in the knees. I mean, whomever could be affiliated to.
You were there?
To Fatah? No, but I used to read. I mean, it was, again, this was still a time when people would report. We had reporters from Gaza, so we would know everything that was happening. And the thing, and also there has been such a huge suppression of basic freedoms. I mean, when I was with UNRWA, one of the most beautiful things we would organize for the children was the summer games, UNRWA summer games, and they managed to make us close them down because they were against Islamic values. So I had literally zero sympathy for Hamas as a political actor. Back then, I could have these political views because I was not acting as a special rapporteur. It was in my private capacity. I was not even working for UNRWA anymore.
Yes.
But what I meant to say is that was a criticism, again, to Western countries who, without being able for 75 years to agree on a definition of terrorism, because there is no, terrorism doesn't exist in international law. It's not a crime per se, because there is not there are other crimes that, of course, it's a criminal act, but you need to qualify it under the existing bodies of international law. And it might be a crime against, so an act can be a crime against humanity or a war crime. It's far too easy to put a label of terrorist on an entity, and especially because Hamas has then been discussed as if it was ISIS. There is a big difference between Hamas and ISIS, and if we do not understand that...
Israel would disagree.
Well, I think that Israel would disagree about many things I say, but let's stick to the facts.
Sure.
The Hamas has started as a charity and does little by working in proximity of people as a spin-off of the Muslim Brotherhood. It has grown. It started operating in the in the 80s, and it has grown when Israel had still boots on the ground in Gaza. Israel has done everything possible, and this is by the very admission of many politicians, from Ehud Barak to Olmert, especially Netanyahu, has always supported the growth and the strengthening of Hamas so as to create a rift in the Palestinian political movement, the more secular movement of parties gathered under the umbrella of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was even recognized by the United Nations as the sole representative of the Palestinian people. This was before the negotiation process. So Hamas ran for elections in 2005, elections which were monitored by so many Western observers from the European Union, the Carter Center, and others from Canada, etc. Hamas happens to win. Why? Because there was so much frustration among the Palestinians toward the Palestinian Authority, which had been there.
Fatah.
Mainly Fatah.
Yeah.
Mainly Fatah, because they had moved after the Oslo Accords, they had moved to first Gaza, they had moved back to the West Bank. But since then, the occupation had continued to entrench itself. Settlements continued to expand in the occupied Palestinian territory. There was a lot of corruption within the ranks of the PA, according to the Palestinians. There was a lot. And so in an electoral process, the vote for Hamas was a vote of protest, as it often happens. Now, what happened at that point, Hamas was not was not qualified as a terror organization back then. It was all political parties were still, even Fatah is still considered a terror organization by Israel. Even all charities or human rights organizations are considered political entities that are banned from Israel. This is something...
But we're talking about the European list of terror.
Israel.
Okay. But that...
Israel.
You were talking about, like, back then...
Yeah.
About...
And then what happens that because the vote, the European, Western states didn't like the vote because an Islamist party, clearly, I can understand, but you do not deal with it your own way, because in any case there was the vote of the people. This is what self-determination means. They didn't like the vote. The reality is very complex. But then a war started between Fatah and Hamas, and this is how it all kicked off as a proper conflict. Then Hamas took over Gaza, and to control over Gaza, there was a couple of years of civil war between Fatah members and Hamas. And since 2007, it has taken full control. Israel has tightened its blockade because it was already on the way. Gaza had been closed off more or less since the Oslo Accords. And so, yes, of course, we can debate, we can discuss, we can agree that Hamas commits acts of terror, no question about that. But it's a bit more complicated. It's something that the label terror organization doesn't capture. And terror organization becomes a way to avoid a political discussion and to avoid also political study and also introspection, because no one has looked at the responsibilities of Israel in maintaining that system. You know how many times Palestinians in Gaza have tried to have elections, especially young Palestinians, to have elections, to ask for a change, and Hamas was keeping a tight control over them. And how was it possible? No elections anywhere. There has been always a huge interference from outside and from Israel. And it was very convenient for Israel to keep Hamas in Gaza and to keep on kicking the can in the air so that there could be no two-state solutions. And this was Netanyahu's agenda.
So Hamas is nowadays is back on the list of terror organizations.
The United Nations?
Not in the United Nations, but like for the US, for European Union, Germany. Are you critical of that?
I go with the United Nations, and the United Nations do not have Hamas on the list of terror organizations, which doesn't mean that Hamas doesn't commit crimes and Hamas shouldn't pay for the crimes it has committed. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that.
But are you okay with the European list of terror organizations?
I think that there is a good deal of hypocrisy because there is the European Union, like other states, used to different standards when it comes to assess. The list is more political, in my view, than responding to legal criteria. Mm-hmm. They're free to do whatever they like. But again, for me, what matters ultimately, and again, you quoted something that I had written in my private capacity many years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was clear that it was available to the members of the Human Rights Council because it was part of a dossier that one of these governmental organizations who are very pro-Israeli funded through pro-Israeli group funds in Geneva. They made sure.
That's why I only used your words.
Maybe we can also use my words, the words I've uttered as a special rapporteur, because they're not less controversial.
We will come to that.
Okay.
We were talking about you taking the job and then the backlash and people attacking you. Or I also read that people criticize you for not recognizing Palestinian terrorism over the years.
But again, I do not. Have you heard me speaking of Jewish terror, as many do? No, because I use international law categories, and under IHL, I can, because there is no universal definition of what constitutes terrorism.
Do you have a definition, or you don't?
No, there are at least 22 definitions of what constitutes terrorism.
What's your favorite?
I think that basically it's using committing crimes, which include spreading terror among the civilian population with the objective of achieving political gains. This could be one, or ideological gains, but it's harming civilians.
So the acts of Hamas on October 7th, with that definition, was terrorism.
But there is no, surely so. Yeah. And so what Israel does. This is why I don't think it's useful, because we have international crimes, which are very, very clear. War crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide and aggression. So did you find the crime of terror in the list that the ICC prosecutor put together when he applied for arrest warrants being issued?
No.
Because there is not such a thing as crime of terrorism, my friend.
Did you just say Israel is committing terrorism as well? Yeah.
Well, if you adopt that definition, that
Yes.
very vague definition, spreading terror among civilians to reach political gain. How would you define sending soldiers in the middle of the night? To give you just one example, when I became a special rapporteur, I received this file from a village. For over 30 nights, they had been invaded by the Israeli army between midnight and 5 a.m. Like 25 heavily armored soldiers would enter the homes of Palestinians in areas where clearly there was no one engaged committed to political activities. So this is the logic, this is the strategy, and it's documented by the very soldiers who have broken the silence. And so there was this case of this village in the West Bank where soldiers would enter every other night between midnight and 5 and keep all the village awake, and sometimes take children, sometimes take adults back to the detention center for interrogation. Sometimes they would be released, sometimes they would be detained, sometimes they would be detained without charges or trials for days. And this was one example. And when I started discussing with former soldiers, I understood that that was a method. What is this? But again, because there are legal categories out there, and as a lawyer committed to investigate and report based on violations of established international law, human rights law, humanitarian law, and other international conventions. This is what I do.
So you're using the language of law, of international law, and not political language.
That's
like
right.
Terrorists is a political category.
It's politicized. It's a very politicized language.
And you consider your job as a special rapporteur as a job of law and not a political.
It's not that I consider it. It is that, and of course, we operate
but
in
don't
a
you make political statements through your reports and in your interviews?
It's not that the law exists in an ivory tower.
Right.
We are part of a political system. Right. And the thing is that I aim to influence political conduct so that it can go back to a path of conformity with international law, because we are very, very far from that.
So you're like a United Nations influencer.
I like it. Yes, I'm a United Nations influencer. I will tell my colleagues.
So,
would like.
Like Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, he wants to issue warrants against the leaders of Hamas, 3 leaders of Hamas, and Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Gallant. And Khan accuses the Hamas leaders of having committed crimes including extermination, mass killing, murder, hostage-taking, rape, and sexual violence and torture. And the prime minister and defense ministers are suspected of crimes including starvations of civilians as a method of warfare, murder, internationally directing attacks against civilian population, and also extermination. No words of terrorism.
That's not a crime yet.
What do you make of these warrants? Were you happy when you heard the news?
Yeah, I was.
Why?
I was, because eventually victims deserve this. Victim deserves to see those who have engineered the actions, the conduct that caused them so much suffering, so much pain, which torn their lives apart. Both Israelis and Palestinians, they need justice. They need to see the perpetrators investigated and, if found guilty, prosecuted. This is what should have happened since the very beginning of this, after the 7th of October.
But I mean,
and before.
Hamas condemned these warrants, the Israeli side as well. Do you really think that one day we're going to see the Hamas leaders or Bibi on the stand, like on the court stand? Is that realistic?
It is.
Really?
Well, look, would you, as a German, would you imagine the fall of the Berlin Wall in the 70s? I don't know. Would you imagine that
I wasn't
it was
alive.
realistic?
I wasn't alive.
Are you that young? Oh my God.
I was born in 85.
Good for you.
But
however,
my parents and everyone were like, they didn't believe in the fall of the wall until like 89. Like it was very close.
yeah, but this is why I say in the 70s, would they imagine? Because the thing is that when you live an almost surreal reality, plus I don't think that anything compares to what these two people are going through. And I don't think that they can be, I mean, it's extremely painful and terrifying, but in different ways, because now the Palestinians have been heavily bombarded for 8 months. And in as much as I feel the pain of everyone, I think that there is really a different crimes that have been committed. But all of them, from a victim's perspective, they deserve justice. And I don't know, look, the thing is, what is realistic? I don't know what is realistic, because I'm not a political analyst, but as a lawyer, I know what should be done. And continuing to second, sort of to allow impunity to reign will only be the fast track to more frustration and violence. Because I do believe that the situation, in the past weeks, I've read the report that I wrote just before this one, the one on children that I presented on the 22nd of October. It has received very little attention, although it's one of the most difficult reports I've written, because it was written after interviewing many children in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, and in East Jerusalem. Children who had their home demolished and their fathers either killed or detained for decades, their school demolished, their siblings killed, who had gone through 4 wars and they were like 15, kids who live with this fear of dying or seeing anyone die. And also I had some important reflections on what does it mean to be an Israeli settler as a child, someone who grows in this system and who's in an illegal outpost or settlement, who shouldn't even exist, who shouldn't be there, and is there and grows up there because of the choice of his or her states or family, and then is indoctrinated to hate the Palestinians and to feel superior vis-a-vis the Palestinians. So when I reread this report, I could see that there were the seeds for this to happen. I could really, oh my God, it was written on the wall that the situation on the Palestinian side would explode. I was expecting it to happen in the West Bank, not to necessarily where there has been over the past years.
I mean, the Israelis expected the same, obviously.
They were provoking a lot. They were making it happen. Because this would have created the perfect storm to push the Palestinian out. To escalate what they normally do. It's forced displacement, physical segregation, and I don't know how much the German public and your audience is familiar with Palestine. But if they have never been to Palestine, to occupied Palestine, to the occupied Palestinian territory, I think that it's important to take them through this virtual tour and explain to them what it means to.
We did dozens of interviews in Israel, in occupied West Bank, in Gaza. We did a documentary on Hebron, the situation in Hebron. So I think our audience knows more familiar with the situation than the typical German audience.
Yeah.
But were you surprised by what happened on October 7th?
Yeah. It was shocking.
What shocked you?
The violence. the violence and the dehumanization of the other. The fact that, I've read so many times that Palestinian children are so heavily traumatized that these alter their behavior. Half of the population in Gaza is under 18. 40% of them is under 15. They've been lived in a cage. Many of them, the majority of them, has never gone out of Gaza. This is what they know. When I was interviewing the children last summer, one of them, I can't remember if it was told, I was told by two children. I was having focus groups, and one child said, she's so lucky. My friend, she's so lucky because she's sick. So she has leukemia or cancer. So she could go to the West Bank, get treated, and see the mountains while I'm stuck here. These are people who had been deprived of the luxury of dreaming a different life. So Gaza was everything for them, everything. But there was also so much violence. There had been 5 wars which had killed in 16 years 4,500 people, including 1,300 kids in Gaza alone in 16 years. And total separation from the Israelis. So the Palestinians had no perception of who an Israeli could be other than the soldiers. And remember, 2018, when there was the Great March of Return, so the Friday protests, there were 80 Palestinians injured. Many of them were shot in their knees. So there is 8,000 people, many of whom have permanent handicap. And this was because the soldiers were shooting at them from the towers. There were 300 people killed during protests, against the occupation, against the closure. So Palestinians have learned violence. And of course, this has also led them, the fear, the anger, the frustration, the trauma has probably led them to dehumanize the other to a point that, clearly it was painful, very painful for me and for everyone, I would say, to see the taking of civilian hostages, to see the scenes of the killing of young people, elderly. And then there is also, I think, and you see, and if it happens to me, imagine the others. In a way, we are used. We are continuously fed with images of dead bodies from the Palestinian side, and I'm sorry to say, there is this. They're brown. They're brown. They're not. They clearly don't look Westerner. And I think in our perception, we got used to Palestinian bodies being massacred. For me, seeing images of Israelis in a reality totally developed that looked like our own cities, our own towns, I had a couple of days where I wouldn't know what to think, what to say. I was asking myself, how will I continue to do this job?
What was the answer? Why did you continue?
I don't think I have the full answer yet, because every now and then there are a few things that come up. But one thing was is the memory of what I had been told over and over by a team of psychologists and psychiatrists who have helped me, who have advised me as I was writing 2 reports. Because especially the one on children, I had... because I was interviewing them remotely, so I always had adequate support in order to make sure that I wouldn't ask questions that could victimize them. Many of them had their siblings killed, including during the Jenin Israeli army's attack 1 month earlier. A 15-year-old girl had been killed, and she happened to be the sister of a child I was interviewing. So I had, and they they had somewhat planted into me this thing that you cannot underestimate what trauma does. It dehumanizes you and it leads you to dehumanize the others. On the one hand, there was this in the back of my mind, but also very early on, the Israeli discourse, the Israeli public discourse became so violent, so openly violent. I mean, I said, wait a second, whatever they have done, criminal as is, there's still, I mean, there are rules. And when there are crimes, this is when the justice system kicks in. There are arrests, there are investigations, there are prosecutions. This idea of killing everyone through targeted assassinations, this is something that has come into our world. This is the American shock doctrine, but this is not the multilateral system that we have worked hard to build up since the Second World War. And then this dehumanizing language, they are all human animals, they are subhumans, and then they are all responsible. And the fact that in 9 days they had killed more people in Gaza than the number of people who have been killed in 2014, which was the most lethal war of the 5 that Israel had unleashed against Gaza since the blockade was started. Then, I came back to senses, and I kept on reciting as a mantra. But this is, Tilo, this is something that I've said from the very beginning. We internationals need to be cool-minded and act with compassion and wisdom toward both the Israelis, who are clearly going through a collective trauma, and which brings back.
They still are.
They are.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But because, again, we don't know, and this is the thing, we don't know how trauma, we cannot fully appreciate how trauma transforms people, both as individuals and communities. Somewhat, I understood why many Israelis, and this, of course, I don't justify the reaction, but I understand what the Israelis might have seen that day is the materialization of that indoctrination they had received for decades. If the Palestinians could, they would kill us all. Mm-hmm. This is something that they've been fed, and I think is extremely false. But this is what happened, that one day they came in and they killed many soldiers, but they also killed many civilians in their homes. And so this was, for probably in the eyes of the Israelis, what, the materialization of their worst nightmares. But then it could have been an opportunity to pause and think, what the heck provoked this? What the heck provoked this? How is it possible? Because and this is the thing, how many 7th of October have the Palestinians had? And this is why I push back on the argument that the 7th of October was motivated by antisemitism. First of all, it's been contested by many Israelis, including Israeli scholars who say this is a way, this is a distortion, because this is a way to not to deresponsabilize Israel and to dehistoricize, to decontextualize what the people in Gaza were living. And on the other hand, it feeds into that narrative that the Palestinians ontologically represent a threat. Because they are naturally anti-Semite, they represent an existential threat for the Israelis, and therefore they need to be eliminated. They need to be eliminated because this is what's going on right now.
But the attack came from Hamas, and they're clearly anti-Semites. So couldn't you call, because it was a Hamas attack, it was an anti-Semitic attack?
Why?
Because of Hamas?
Because Hamas is anti-Semitic.
Yes.
Look, I've never, again, this is something that is so entrenched in our Western mentality, but the Palestinians don't think so. The Palestinians don't see this way. The Palestinians, and indeed, the attack.
But you're not a spokesperson for the Palestinians. Like that's, I'm asking you.
I'm not the spokesperson for the Palestinians.
No,
I'm
yeah.
the special rapporteur on international law. On the UPT, and so I come from a place of really analysis and appreciation of what international law is. And I tell you, as someone who has lived there, and has many interactions with, really for work purposes with both Palestinians and Israelis. I mean, the Palestinians have nothing against the Jews per se. They have a big issue with Israel as an apartheid state who has kicked them out of what was their land in 1947-49, destroying everything that they had, dismembering their homeland, never apologize, never recognizing what they had done, and inflicting torment, humiliation, and indignities over and over. But let's look at 1967. Now, why Israel has occupied the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem as of, in November 1967, the Security Council ordered Israel to withdraw its troops. In those very years, the United Nations were sort of criminalizing colonialism. We're saying that colonialism is against everything that the UN stands for. It banned colonialism, and this was a conquest of the people from the global south who were liberating themselves from the chains and the yoke of colonialism around those years. And Israel started building colonies after colonies after colonies after colonies in occupied land. And there was a clear provision that was violated, because as Israel was getting the land and creating Jewish-only settlements, it was pushing out the Palestinians. So what had happened to the Palestinians inside Israel between 1947 and 1959, it took... the Palestinians with Israeli citizenship have been for 20 years under martial law. Many of them remained in Israel but were displaced from the original towns and villages. What was not destroyed was given to Jewish immigrants coming from Europe and other parts of the Arab world. So the thing is that for the Palestinians have... This is something that an Israeli colleague told me as we were in Australia. She said, look, as a Jewish people, we have come to a closure. We have been victimized and persecuted for centuries, as you say, because I often say that we need to recognize it, especially as people in the West. But they came to a closure. They are acknowledged. The crimes, the Holocaust that they have suffered, the pogroms they have suffered are known. It's part of our history. It's a collection of the darkest pages of our European history in European soil. So they came, there is a collective, a sort of a collective cathartic process in recognizing yourself in the pain of your community and overcoming that to become something else. Palestinians never had that closure because the Nakba is denied. The Nakba is not acknowledged. They continue to be killed, blamed, and smeared. And even now, in the little that remains of their land, which is, frankly, look at now, member states wake up and say, let's recognize the state of Palestine. Thank you. And can you also try to stop the atrocities? You don't want to call genocide. Can you stop the atrocities that are ongoing in the occupied Palestinian territory? Because 35,000 people have been killed and Gaza is completely destroyed. Whatever you call it, this is not normal and should be stopped. And you see, this is why the Palestinians harbor so much pain that I wonder how they manage to stay generally that restrained and hopeful This is why I said, we started this interview saying I was totally depressed after 3 years in Jerusalem because it was ugly. It was really ugly to see all these checkpoints and the settlements and the military bases and the continued humiliation of the Palestinians at checkpoints. Sometimes they would be beaten. Sometimes they would have to get stripped naked. It was violent. It was very violent. And my body couldn't tolerate that. So after a while, I packed and went.
So you were obviously against the Israeli response to October 7th, the invasion, the war. What would have been the ideal response of Israel to the terror attacks of October 7th?
Israel has the right to protect its territory and its citizens. So there was for a few days there was an imminent emergency on the ground. Let's aside for a while that there were no soldiers there because most of the soldiers were guarding the crimes being committed by the armed settlers in the West Bank, which last year carried out 12 pogroms, torching orchards and villages. Let this aside for a moment and let's move back. So there were armed combatants, sometimes in Hamas uniforms, sometimes in civilian uniforms, but carrying weapons and attacking both military bases and civilian neighborhoods and kibbutzim. This had to be absolutely dealt with. So what would normally happen, what should have happened was the army regaining control of the territory, so repelling the attack, arresting, and then investigating and prosecuting the crimes, and start immediately the negotiations to free the hostages. And use the international criminal system to get hold of all the criminals who had started.
How do you get the hold of the criminals in Gaza?
Well, you can.
Because most of them who survived went back to Gaza, right?
Yeah, but look, don't forget that on the 7th of October, there were almost 1,400 Palestinians detained sine die without charge and trial in Israeli prisons. Many of them were children. How do you get these people back? How do you, and again, I'm not saying that Hamas did it to set this is the dilemma. You need to have international law kicking in and you need to have a negotiation process. I think there should have been full justice for the victims, full security established in Israeli territory. But how what Israel has done qualify as making Israel and Israelis a more secure place, when we know that in fact, in general, terrorism, if you want to talk about that, or organizations who resort to violence, to armed violence, have germinated as a reaction to injustice after injustice. And this has happened for Hezbollah, and this has happened for Hamas. When Hamas started to operate, the occupation, and it was very violent, had already lasted 20 years. 20 years of millions of Palestinians being under martial rule. Orders written by soldiers, enforced by soldiers, reviewed in military courts by soldiers. You know that the occupied Palestinian territory is the only place on earth which normally, on a regular basis, and it has done so for 56 years, tries civilians in military courts. They have even invented the juvenile military system. So detention should be a last resort and should always be carried out in the best interest of the child. Look at how, and so children should not appear before a military judge. And this is what happens. Imagine the torment now there have been 700 children arrested and detained by Israel every year on average since since the UN started collecting the data in the year 2000, this was after the Second Intifada, the system was so violent, so violent. I mean, imagine these children who grow up, many of them arrested and detained and tried when they are 12-year-old. For what? For having thrown a stone at an armored vehicle. And you know what is the charge for that? From 10 to 20 years. This is not normal. This is not normal. This is why I'm saying the Palestinians have known nothing other than violence. And for years, they have trusted the international system. I'm not saying that to excuse. I'm saying that because I'm trying to understand and to make people understand that if we want to avoid further violence, and if we want to make sure that the Israelis do not have further days like the 7th of October, and the Palestinians as well, although after what seriously, I struggle. People think of how to rebuild Gaza, the buildings, how to rebuild the souls of these people who have been completely devastated by what has happened on the scene after the 7th of October. And so this is why I was saying, where is diplomacy? Where is diplomacy? We cannot resort to war in general, because then I'm telling you, from a legal point of view, Israel didn't have the right to wage a war against the occupied Palestinian territory. I will come to this.
Well, they call it a war of self-defense, and the German government agrees.
I'm surprised, because in Germany there are some of the best, in the US there are also some of the best lawyers I can think of.
Just quoting the German government, that's what they've been saying. This is what Israel does in Gaza is, first of all, a self-defense.
Yeah, but because, I mean, again, I don't want to comment on Germany because
Feel free.
No, but I mean, for me, it's completely irrational, makes no sense at all. But it also tells me probably there is a trauma, a collective trauma in this country, which I do not understand. Because, You don't understand the German trauma of committing the Holocaust? No, not that. Okay. We'll get to that. But let me finish. So my point is that there were, and it's a very important point, what we are just about. I'm not trying to evade it. Actually, I want to clarify why it's not a war, why it's not a lawful war of self-defense.
Yes.
But again, because there was, as the Secretary General of the UN said in October, there is a context. We cannot miss it. And it's the context of 56 years of dispossession, brutalization, illegal settlements, taking of the land, taking of the resources. Again, I know that your audience is familiar with it. So but
it's also a German audience, Francesca, so keep that in mind.
How can we move forward? And again, I was not advocating for peace and love on the 8th of October. I was just saying, wait a second, because I do really trust international law as a way to balance and to different positions, different interests, and act in a way that harm the least possible number of innocent civilians. So Israel doesn't have the right to wage a war against the Palestinians under occupation. First of all, because, states might disagree and some people in the doctrine might disagree, but what is the interpretation? The prevalent interpretation of the International Court of Justice is that a state can only wage a war under the circumstances of Article 51, but again, so when it's under attack, or when it's authorized by the Security Council against a threat coming from another state. Mm-hmm. Here, Israel never claimed that the threat was coming from the state of Palestine. Why? Because Israel doesn't recognize the state of Palestine. So against
and Gaza is not a state either.
No, Gaza is part of the non-sovereign, non-independent state of Palestine, because the state of Palestine exists but under captivity and without borders. So this is why now it's very interesting from a legal and practical point of view, what does the recognition mean? Because look, in international law, there is not such a thing like the right of a state to exist. It makes me laugh when I say, do you recognize the right of Israel to exist? Israel exists. Let's start by saying that Israel is a member of the United Nations, and as such, it has all my respect and recognition as a UN Special Rapporteur. Mm-hmm. This is my position. However, there is not such a thing in international law like the right of states to exist. There is the recognition of the sovereignty of a state. So once a state exists, it exists, full stop. But there is the right of the people to exist. And states can transform themselves, can merge, can secede. And so there are many things that can happen to states, but it's the will of the people that should prevail. This is the essence, the beauty of the right of self-determination. But so Israel could not wage a war against the non-state actors. And if states like Germany or the US or my own country, Italy, disagree, well, in a normal rule of law system, you go to the International Court of Justice and you ask for another advisory opinion, which upgrades the interpretation on how to use force in international relations when you can wage a war. All the more, there is also a decision, an advisory opinion of the ICJ, which recognizes the security threats posed emanating from the occupied territory for Israel. But it says you cannot wage a war against the Palestinian. You cannot invoke self-defense in the territory you occupy, because there is also something else. An occupation that has been ongoing for 56 years, which is largely deemed unlawful because it has frustrated the right of self-determination. It has turned into a vehicle to build colonies after colonies and to force displaced and dispossess the occupied population. So it has completely crushed the right of self-determination, which is the right to exist as a people, not fragmented, not under control, not continuously confined and robbed of their resources, not discriminated, not under apartheid. Israel has become all this through the Israeli occupation in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem.
Well, the question of legality of the occupation is actually coming up very soon in The Hague.
Yes. Yeah.
The ICJ is going to rule if because Israel says it's still a temporary occupation, which makes it legal.
It's not.
And the others, or most other people, think it's a permanent occupation, which would make it illegal of itself.
Yeah. But in the past years...
Germany agrees with Israel, by the way. I don't know what Italy says. The US supports it too.
Well, Italy's... yeah. Let's talk about Germany. No, but the thing is, how do we are people out of their mind? I mean, they live in a parallel reality. Settlements are war crimes. How do they justify 300 settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory? Israel has full direct control of 60% of occupied West Bank. Mm-hmm. Most water resources, by the way, 75% of the water resources of Gaza as well. And has illegally annexed East Jerusalem. I mean, if these member states then have recognized the state of Palestine, but they are now recognizing the state of Palestine. These member states who have for 30 years advocated for a two-state solution were serious about that. They would have gone to Israel and say, now you stop building colonies. Because what is a state? The Palestinians are not ready to take states that look like a coalition of Vatican states, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. They want a territory. The little that they can have, this is what they wanted 30 years ago, at least. This is what they agreed. This is what the PLO signed off. They thought they were signing off. It was something else. But the Oslo Accords has worked very well for it not to happen. Mm. But anyway, they agreed to have that territory. That territory is gone. So now, while the PA continues to insist on the two-state solutions, I say there are two generations that they do not even participate to the political process. Now it's time to first stop the violence, bring back some calm and protection for both Palestinians and the Israelis, because there are many Israelis who feel threatened by the current Israeli regime. And then people will decide. I know it's going to happen in a long time. Now, we'll go back to what you were...
We were talking about that Israel calls this war Gaza self-defense. And you say...
No, it's not self-defense.
They're not allowed to wage war either way.
No, they should have applied IHL. IHL allows...
What is that?
Sorry. So, as an occupying power, although it's an unlawful and a bad faith occupant, because a bad faith occupier, in the sense, occupying power, in the sense that is not operating according to the law, the occupation is not temporary, the occupation has translated into an apartheid regime, an oppressive regime. So there are many arguments to argue in favor of the recognition of the unlawfulness of the occupation. But as long as it is the occupying power, de facto, it is to abide by international law. And the legal framework that applies first and foremost when there is an occupation is international humanitarian law. So the Geneva Conventions and the Hague Regulation. So under those legal frameworks, Israel has the power and the duty to maintain law and order, which means carry out operations that bring back law and order. If Israel was not... because this is the argument that I heard, but how can Israel go inside the Gaza Strip? There is not 1 centimeter of the Gaza Strip that Israel doesn't know. Had the priority been setting the hostages free, all the hostages would be out by now. Because Israel has, even without boots on the ground, but with a massive intelligence control and network of informants, unfortunately, that has established, it would have found the hostages. It could have had operations, it could have had a mediation team to set the hostages free, but it was not ready to make concessions. Because Israel had to reassert, it's the way this has been narrated. It's the bestiality of the century, and these people have to be punished. I know it's painful what the Israelis suffered, but it's very painful, the very reality that has been set up. And people preferred not to see. But my mandate and those who have preceded, those who have preceded me in the mandate, it's 20 years that we raise the alarm and we say, violence breeds violence. It's going to explode. They really, and the Israeli army and the Israeli settlers, especially with the new government coalition, had grown in their hubris, and they continue to speak freely of annexing this, annexing that, moving the Palestinians out. You know how many times they have said that the Palestinians should go to Jordan from the West Bank and to Egypt from the Gaza Strip. I think that there was such a level of the situation was untenable, and again we probably do not. We have such a double standard ingrained in ourselves. I know that many people who will be listening to me would think that I'm an extremist, and again, because we are intimately racist. We do not see the Palestinians as human beings with equal expectations and rights to be free, to protect themselves than the Israelis have. This is not my problem. This is the problem of the bias of many political leaders in our Western societies, which is very different from what is profoundly felt right now by the newer generations, who cannot stomach anymore this injustice, who cannot stomach the killing of innocent people day after day, thousands of children amputated without anesthesia, dying because there are no medications. The bombing of the fertility clinic, the destruction of whole hospitals. What is this? Starving people to death. What is this?
you saying violence breeds violence immediately made me think of what happens after this war. Because at some point, this war in Gaza will end. We don't know how and what happens next. Like if Israel will occupy the whole Gaza Strip, if somehow Hamas stays in power or some new group comes in or the PA. But this horror of this war, like I'm afraid what could cause new violence in the future.
But why do you think of the Palestinians becoming violent? I'm very scared of the Israelis as well. Look at what they've become. I mean, 80% of the population wants more violence against the people in Gaza.
The Palestinians as well, don't they? Like we just had a professor from East Jerusalem here a few weeks ago, and people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, they're like supporting Hamas now.
Because if they want, they want armed resistance. They want to be free. You see, this is why if you think, Hamas is a terror organization, immediately you see, these people support terrorism. If you think that the Palestinians are an oppressed people who deserve to be free, and under international law they have a right to resist a brutal occupation, we like it or not, but this is what has led the decolonization process in many countries. And I wish it could be different. I wish it can still happen in a way that is not, it will never be pain-free, but it can be peaceful. It can be peaceful, but it requires a lot.
Of course it can be peaceful, but the reality of the last 20 years tells me we will see a new round of violence, maybe from both sides, but especially from those who suffered the most in Gaza. I mean...
I thought the same, and then, there are a couple of things that, again, we do not necessarily understand because culturally we are different. I mean, the cultural background and also the religious background, I've heard many in my part of the world, including politicians, saying, if I were Palestinians, I would be very violent. Well, the Palestinians are not. Most Palestinians have embraced peaceful resistance among the most despicable and adverse circumstances. And I was talking to a professor, to an Italian professor who's of Palestinian origins in Italy, and I was saying what you are saying to me now, saying I'm really scared for what the Palestinian people will harbor inside themselves and they will want revenge. I say, no, we don't seek revenge. We seek revenge when we are continually fed with violence. But and then he was talking about religion, and I've heard this from other people who have lost 40 family members. I mean, saying, if I'm still alive, is because God has wanted me to be here, and then I need to keep on cultivating the values that I grew up with. This is the best way to honor my family. And again, of course, you can interpret now someone listening to us and say, because they've been nurtured to be terrorists. No. Palestinians want to be free. And so I will not stigmatize the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people to resist, like the black South African under apartheid, or the Algerians when they were under French colonization. Colonialism is very ugly. How did we let it happen in the 21st century? This is the question we should answer.
You have an answer for that?
Yeah. Because there is something deeply ingrained in our Western societies, and it's the fact that Europe is where settler colonialism, I mean, in the modern era, then we can talk about the of course, old Greece and the Athenians were also the big colonizers of the ancient world. But in our history, until 200 years ago, Europe has been hugely invested in colonizing, in subjugating other people to take their resources. It happened to the Americas. It happened early on in the Americas, Latin America, and then North America, and Canada, and Australia, and then Africa. The scramble for Africa happened in the 19th century, and I think, and we have justified this to ourselves, first with the civilizing mission of educating them, turning them into children of God. The evangelical mission. This is how Western people have justified colonialism. We have to turn these uncivilized into decent humans.
Yeah.
And then, it's always been civilizing the barbarians. And we might have forgotten what it is, but people in the global south have not. And still, they are not violent, but they know that we are intimately racist, because what has animated this colonialism is this ideology of, I don't call it a theory, it's an ideology of a superior race. And white, Christian, superior race. White, male, Christian, superior race. And then, this colonialism has lasted for hundreds of years, and it has left a significant imprint in our societies. This is why, we do not react. Many people have commented on how different it was, our reception of Ukrainian refugees, compared to refugees from the global south, being it Iraq or Afghanistan or Ethiopia, Eritrea, and migrants. Why? How is it? And some politicians have said, because these are like us. What does it mean they are like us? Because they look like us. Maybe because they are Christian, or maybe because they are white. Tilo, I know it's heavy to process, but we are racist. And there are two things that I don't know if they have happened accidentally, but there is a huge colonial amnesia. There has been a huge colonial amnesia, and we have willfully forgotten, or to also teach, because it required a lot of introspection, a lot of admission, taking responsibility. So, the world is unequal. It is what it is. They're uncivilized. They are barbarians. This is the way we still approach people from the global south. Look at how development cooperation works. We send young resources to teach people in whatever African country how to do their job. And it's such a, seriously, it's so disparaging. And there is also colonial aphasia. We do not have the words to fully describe what is the lived experience of the colonized. So I know it sounds very, very theoretical, very remote, because it has been removed from our reality. But the young generation, they get it. Don't ask me why, they get it.
But just to clarify, you talk about the colonization of Palestinian land, not of the Jewish people having or living in Israel. You only talk about the Israel occupation of the Palestinian territories and the creating of settlements. Or what?
I'll get it. So first of all, I was talking of colonialism as a broader experience. The Portuguese, the Spaniards, the French, and the Brits. Now, if you go back to the founding fathers, so where does the idea of a Jewish state come from in the late 1800s? It was conceptualized because after centuries of persecutions and pogroms, a part of the Jewish communities in Europe started to think that the only way to protect themselves would be to have a state of their own, a Jewish state. Others were against it, and this is political Zionism, like believing that a state would grant full protection, and then there was another part of the Jewish people in Europe who wanted to be No, they thought that full protection would mean full recognition of rights and equalities. And by the way, the Jews in the Arab world have been such a key vector of the transformation, because there was a discrimination in the Ottoman Empire between the Muslim majority and the Jews and the Christians, although they were integrated in the society. It's not that they were persecuted, but there were some discrimination also in the military proscription, and the Jews were a critical actor, as I was saying, of transformation that pushed to the reform of the Ottoman Empire to be fully recognized. And I think that this was back then, what was the mentality? However, this idea of having a state translated into the beginning of discussions with the strong powers back then, which were the European powers, particularly the UK, in order to have them have their help in creating a state somewhere. They were talking. The Jewish Congress in Europe was was discussing the possibility of a state in Argentina, in Uganda, even in Utah, and Palestine had a great appeal because of the historical significance of Palestine. There was a 10% Jewish presence back then in historical Palestine, but it was everywhere in the Arab region because the Jews had been kicked out of Europe and for centuries, and this is where they found refuge. But the language that the founding fathers of Israel as of the early 20th century used was colonialism. Let us colonize Palestine as Britain has colonized India and France has colonized Algeria. Now, there was already a project to create. The Balfour Declaration recognized it to create a Jewish, not state, it was called the homeland or national home in Palestine. Mm-hmm. So the two things converged. There was this project of creation of a Jewish state in Palestine, which eventually is what happened. And then there was the increasing the rise of persecution of the Jews that culminated with the Holocaust. It was all Europe, and so the one tragedy converged with another tragedy, because the creation of the State of Israel inside Palestine. So of course it became the homeland of the refugees from the Holocaust. But why so also? Because many of these refugees were rejected from the US, Australia, the UK. They really had nowhere to go. This is why at the beginning, Thilo, I was saying, I understand why many of them feel that the State of Israel is so critical to them as a people, to their protection, because the State of Israel has represented this safe haven, which has given strength and collective dignity to a people who had been genocided. But I get it.
Are you saying the existence of proper Israel now is the result of colonization? Or when you talk about colonization nowadays, are we talking about the occupied territory?
That is pure. I mean, the State of Israel, like the United States. The United States. Do you recognize that the United States is the product of a settler colonial project? You don't feel obliged to reply. I will reply. Yes, and it has happened it has turned into the genocide of the Native Americans. And so Australia, it's a settler colonial society, which today openly, I mean, there are issues there, but openly recognizes that they live on colonized land.
Right. But the settlers who are colonizing nowadays are Israeli settlers in occupied Palestine.
Now,
but
yes.
The Jews are not colonizing Israel because
Israel today is a member state of the United Nations. Its origins, in my view, are both those of a settler colonial project, because it was mostly Jews from Europe moving to. I understand the biblical ties, the religious ties. They didn't have the right to displace the Palestinians, though. They could have moved to the land without making exclusive claims to that, which is the reality. And I know it's painful, but turning the eyes the other side and lying only makes things worse. I mean, as paraphrasing Camus.
But today's colonization that you talk about...
It continues in the occupied Palestinian territory. Yes. I'm talking of the Gaza Strip, the East Jerusalem, and the West Bank, absolutely. So what is done, is there. Now they have to see how to solve it. I mean, because again, there are refugees from modern-day Israel. And I think it's more, And then what's happening to the West Bank? What's going to happen with the colonies? What's going to happen with Gaza? Because they already, and this is the thing, as of the 12th of October, Israeli leaders have been on record saying, Israeli politicians have been on record saying they wanted to resettle. Gaza. And the soldier was saying, we are here to destroy, displace, and occupy. I mean, I get very frustrated when people who have not investigated what has happened as of the 7th of October, since the 7th of October and since the 8th of October, in fact, in Gaza, conclude that either it's still a war of self-defense, and there's not been genocide. You know that my report has concluded that Israel has already committed acts of genocide in the Gaza Strip. And I know that in 2 years' time, this will be clear, but people need to process this. But more importantly, people need to understand that what constitutes genocide is established by the 1948 Convention, not by personal opinions of what constitutes genocide, and not by personal experiences, painful as they are. Because one thing is that in Europe, people tend to think of, first of all, they think that genocide is mass murder. It's not. Mass murder is another crime. Genocide is something else. It's the destruction of is criminal acts, including killing, infliction of severe bodily or mental harm, and the creation of conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of the people, of the protected group as a whole, or in total or in part, and other acts. But what characterizes genocide is the intent through this act to destroy the people. And how do you destroy the people? Through these acts, when these acts are committed to destroy present and future, to make sure that this people's life will never be what it was before, and gets disintegrated as a community.
But do we know? I mean, this genocide convention, like to eventually label it as genocide, requires intent.
Yes.
From the Israeli side.
Yes.
Do we know?
I do, because I've studied it for 5 months, now 6, because I continue collecting what I consider evidence, although it's not evidence for criminal records, because this is not my mandate. But I've studied what the Israeli political leaders have said over and over, military leaders have said over and over, which doesn't per se constitute genocide. I mean, oral statements are indicative, can be taken as genocidal incitement. But there is the intent. The specific intent of destroying a people in whole or in part can be either direct when there is a policy, or can be inferred. Can be inferred by the conduct, patterns of conduct, the nature and scale of the conduct and the acts committed. And here I say, on the one hand, what has been said by political and military leaders has been internalized, absorbed, and enacted upon by soldiers on the ground, and the pilots, and particularly the infantry.
I mean, they would disagree. Like the IDF would say, nope.
Well, they will. This is why they need to go. They need to go to before a court, and then we need to discuss the evidence that is there.
Although
And
you already made your judgment.
Well, it's not a judgment. I'm not a court, but I, as an expert,
Your analysis.
Yes, I did analyze, and again, I fully agree with most. I mean, not I fully agree. I largely agree with the patterns of conduct that can be identified in the crimes that the prosecutor has identified on the Israeli side.
Mr. Khan.
I have no comment on the because I've not investigated what has happened inside Israel, because I have no mandate. But there is the Commission of Inquiry, which will its report will become published in the coming days, because they have investigated what has happened since the 7th of October. And the thing is that if you link all the dots. Why do you starve people for 8 months? Why do you destroy all the hospitals? Why do you exterminate them? Why do you destroy all the civilian infrastructure? It's true that, wanting to destroy a people in total or in part doesn't mean wanting to kill them all. It's wanting to destroy them as a people. And the people in Gaza are already destroyed as a people. It's so, you know what I think? On the one hand, we need to deconstruct what we know, what we think genocide is. And on the other hand, we need to understand what is, and to relearn what genocide is. And I'm telling you, even myself, I failed to see it coming. Had I known what genocide was, as I know it today, I would have seen it coming. And there was also an Israeli scholar who alerted me 1 year ago, more than 1 year ago, in fact, say, you seem to be very well versed with the question, with the facts. I cannot judge as a lawyer because I'm not a lawyer myself. But why don't you deal with genocide? Why don't you look at this as genocide? This is not genocide. It seems too far-fetched. Mm-hmm. Well, this is the thing. Then you read Raphael Lemkin, the scholar, the Jewish scholar who gave the world the term genocide. And he brings back, he gives you he tells you, explains you in his books why he coined this term, genocide, the destruction of a people. And he said that colonialism, settler colonialism was genocidal by its very essence, because there are different stages and modes of genocide. And the way genocide is criminalized in the Genocide Convention is quite narrow compared to what Raphael Lemkin had envisaged, the destruction of a people also culturally, politically. But again, with what's happening in Gaza, we could see the culmination of what had already been done to the Palestinians. The forcible transfer, the mass displacement, which constitute the removal element of what is the process that leads to the commission of a crime of genocide, the segregation, the physical confinement, and incarceration, mass incarceration. I said in my second report, Israel maintains a system of carceral continuum. You are imprisoned behind bars and beyond bars. And then there is the physical elimination, when the colonized represents a threat to the settler group. Here, the Palestinians have increasingly been treated under occupation as a security threat. But why didn't Israel withdraw the colonies? Why didn't Israel withdraw the army from what remained of historical Palestine and let the Palestinians enjoy their state?
Israel would say that's what they did with Gaza.
No, they maintained full control of Gaza. Gaza was never free. Gaza
But
has
from the
been
outside.
no, well, Gaza has been closed since 1993. This is the reality, and there was a memorandum. There have been memorandum of understandings to grant access and movement. It has never been implemented, and in 2005 the closure was already very strict, but there were still, until 2005, there were still the colonies. They removed the colonies, but they never relinquished control of the aerial space, electromagnetic space, of the resources. Israel controls the water, the electricity of the people in Gaza, and it has destroyed progressively with various wars, the electricity plant, the greenhouses, the farming land, right now, in the last war, the fishing boats. People in Gaza have nothing to resume life. Even if the war, as we call it, stops today, tomorrow it will be impossible for the people in Gaza to resume life. Israel has killed over 400 doctors, thousands of, about 5,000 university students. It has killed scientists, university professors. It has leveled all universities in Gaza.
They would say unintentionally.
Oh, yeah? Well,
That's
no.
what Israel says, right?
But this is not what, again, let me tell you two things. They don't say unintentionally. They say there are two things.
Collateral
First
damage.
of all, let me get there. First of all, the soldiers have, this is the thing, when you have genocide groups who turn genocidal, groups who embrace genocidal violence lose their mind. And then they often boast about the violence they commit because they believe that they are doing something good. Mm-hmm. They are reestablishing law and order. And frankly, this is the history of various genocides we have had in recent and past history. So even without going back to other cases, there are these verified videos of soldiers exploding entire neighborhoods, celebrating how we have taught them a lesson, how we have vindicated our victims, we have killed the roaches, the level of dehumanization. It has been a war against the people. And let me now go to the logic, because we say there is no policy. There is no document.
I was going to ask, there doesn't need to be like a email or some paper where it says, please commit genocide.
You Germans
now.
like asking this question, don't you?
No, I know. I've seen the question where you, at some press conference from a colleague of mine. Yeah, but just to clarify. Yeah.
By the way, if he's listening to us, hi, I didn't mean to be mean. But the thing is, the question was really awkward. But so. Israel has not denied what it has done. You say it yourself. It has said that it was collateral damage or human shields. This is why Israel has not denied to have destroyed what they have destroyed. Israel has not denied to have killed. Well, now they dispute the numbers, but doesn't matter. They do not dispute to have killed as many people. They justify this as in compliance with international law.
Right.
They said, we have targeted terrorists. And this is why, let's go back to what international law allows. In an armed conflict, you can only kill combatants, and actually, you can only fight against combatants. Combatants who are in active combat and who represent a threat can be neutralized, killed.
Not civilians.
No, but even a combatant, an Israeli soldier who's having his cup of tea with his family, doesn't matter he's a soldier. He cannot be killed if he's out of duty. Mm-hmm. You can only target. Killing a soldier is a tragedy, but it's not a crime in an armed conflict. And same with a combatant, but they need to be in active combat, in active duty. Mm-hmm. And Instead, Israel has started this campaign by saying we are going to eradicate Hamas, fight against Hamas, kill, destroy everything, fully demilitarize the area. But in fact, and I've said it from the very beginning, what does it mean wanting to eradicate Hamas? Because Hamas is a political party, is the authority which has reigned over Gaza, like it or not, and it has schools. It has doctors. It has Ministry of Health run hospitals. It has universities. This is something that I feared from the very beginning, and then it has happened, in fact. So everyone remotely affiliated with Hamas has become a target. And the targets have been identified through
just for a second. Like these targets have been also Israeli targets in previous wars in Gaza. I mean, there were always bombed hospitals, bombed schools.
Oh, yeah.
Were these wars genocidal as well? Or what's different now?
No, but some argue yes. It's just that I've not. I mean, actually, you raise a valid point, because in 2009. It was Justice Goldstone, the Commission of Inquiry on Gast-led operation, the first violent, brutal war that they had, which had killed like probably 500, 600 people. I can't even remember anymore. But they said the Goldstone report criticized and condemned that feature of expanding ad infinitum this concept of human shields, collateral damage. So in the report I say this is not unprecedented. It has been used, this argument of human shields and collateral damage. It has been used in 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, 2021, 2022. All the previous wars. And then in most cases it was UN Commission of Inquiries who proved that Israel had either lied or not substantiated its claims. Sometimes Israel had to retract the claims that he had made. But the thing is that it has identified target through a system, through an artificial intelligence system, and there are Israeli investigative journalists who have alerted us of this early on. But also, so the thing is that the buildings so for example, if an Hamas affiliate, combatant or not, I mean, this is something that needs to be accurately determined, had passed by or was in a building, the entire building has been targeted with families inside. And this has happened over and over. And so a room, I mean, even paradoxically, an apartment that had been used or might have been used by someone who was a Hamas affiliate was deemed to become a target. This is how Israel has operated. So there has been, first of all, this large identification of targets, which explains the carpet bombing of the first, I mean, how come Israel killed 250 people per day over the first 6-8 weeks of this conflict? And it was because of the bombs. It unloaded an arsenal of 2 nuclear bombs in a few months only over Gaza, used 2 pounds bombs and what is called the bunker bombs that created real craters that I was saying, oh my God, but if the hostages are in the tunnels, they're going to be killed as well. So there was a use of international humanitarian law jargon like legitimate target, human shields. And to use human shields, you need to prove that these people, I mean, human shields is prohibited. Using human shields is prohibited under international law. Is when, as a combatant or a soldier, you hide yourself behind a civilian.
Or like in a civilian house. So but
it means that the operation is there. It's not the urban warfare, the nature of the operation that allows someone to say, oh, these are Hamas is hiding between in a hiding behind human shields. If this is the nature of the operations, you need to take precautions. And in the past, Israel, in as much as it has always been heavy-handed in its operations in Gaza, it has been less heavy-handed. So,
But do you doubt Hamas uses human shields?
I think that sometimes, I don't know, I don't have evidence of this. I've interviewed people
Really?
who said, I've interviewed people who said that they have seen Hamas entering houses and entering premises, but I do not have this information. I do not rule out that it might have happened. But Israel needs to provide the evidence. It's not up to me. Is the army who launches the attack that needs to provide the evidence that people are using. You know how easy it is to understand what is a human shield? Is Israel, there are at least 31 instances of documented by at least 4 commission of inquiries of Israel using human shields in Gaza, putting people, including children, on the tracks, or asking kids to come with them while they were Palestinian kids while they were conducting military operations. This is a human shield. Hamas hiding themselves against a civilian while carrying out operation. This is human shields. Urban guerrilla is not human shields. It's another type of combat.
And I know that a lot of Palestinians, and they tell me like Hamas doesn't care about their civilian population. They fight for a greater cause. You know,
they fight.
They fight, and if it takes 10,000, 100,000 civilians to die for their cause, they don't care.
But this is the thing. They fight. Fighting in an urban area doesn't mean using human shields. And I cannot rule this out. It's possible, but it's not proven. I mean, I've not seen evidence of this ever provided in this context, for example. But there is another element. Even if, for example, hospitals have been destroyed because there was the Hamas central commando, or there was Hamas using the hospital shouldn't have been destroyed, because the hospitals are particularly protected objects in armed conflicts because of their significance, because they provided assistance to the wounded. So the presence of, even if there was a military operation in there, the hospital wasn't an active military operation. The hospital wasn't to be destroyed in its entirety, because
a hospital can never be attacked?
No, they lose the protected status, but those inside do not. The doctors, the nurses, the patients. And then, again, you see, we are so in sort of used to the bombing of hospitals, but this is not normal. I mean, why would you torch?
I remember our foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, she was like, yeah, well, it's problematic to bomb hospitals, but if these preconditions are met, it can be allowed. And like she was... Well,
if this is the approach, look, it weakens the protection established in international humanitarian law. Because, you know, in international humanitarian law, there is not just the principle of distinction. You need always to distinguish between civilians and combatants, civilian objects and military objects. There is also there are other two principles, the principles of precautions and proportionality.
Right.
So there is a military operation that is carried out by in the hospital, from the hospital. You take
shooting rockets from the hospital, let's say.
Yeah. In that case, you order the evacuation of there were thousands. I mean, in Al-Shifa, for example, there was not a military action. There was apparently the central commando of Hamas headquarters under Al-Shifa. So in that case, you need to give the possibility to the people who are in there, and there were doctors, nurses, patients, and IDPs, thousands of IDPs. So you need to give them the opportunity to evacuate. This does not happen. And in fact, many people have been shot at as they were trying to, during the first siege of Al-Shifa, they have been shot at as they were trying to go into the hospital, as they were trying to get out of the hospitals. People have been killed and again, during the takeover of Al-Shifa, during the first military operation on Al-Shifa, eventually no central commando, no central headquarters was found. And so Al-Shifa, it was affected, but it started operating again. And the second invasion was really barbaric. It was barbaric. There were mass graves found. Hundreds of bodies have been found, including of children and people with their hands tied behind their back, including with the IV needle in their arm, and medical personnel. So it's been very, very violent, very heavy. And we need to link this. This is why I say we need to link the dots.
I mean, everybody can read your report from March 25th.
Yes.
Called Anatomy of a Genocide for further details. And since we don't have all the time in the world, two more questions regarding the genocide accusation. When you read Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor for the ICC, like he's not talking about genocide. He suspects Netanyahu and Galland of crimes including starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, murder, intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population, and extermination. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't he?
Well, he doesn't even refer to torture and arbitrary deprivation of liberty, which is heavily documented. But look, if you read further, he says that the investigation is open and active, and his office might ask for further arrest warrants and list other crimes. They're still investigating.
And is this, like, from your perspective, a clear-cut case of genocide, or are there like pros and also cons? Like,
someone has called it a textbook case of genocide from the very beginning.
Well, I'm asking you.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you. For me, it was not that textbook in the beginning. And the more we go on, again, I don't think there are two genocides that look like. There are two genocides that look alike, but the level of there is one thing that is common to all genocides, and is the dehumanization of the other, the reduction of the other to nothing, to less than a human, so that you do not feel empathy, and killing them is totally accepted and normal, normalizing the crimes. So again, I don't know what the prosecutors will do.
I was just informed that you have to leave by 9. Since we started 30 minutes later, I thought we would add the 30 minutes.
I think we have.
Can we do a little more?
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you okay? A little bit.
All right. And if the ICJ in a few months or a few years rules that it was not a genocide, what will you say? That you were wrong, or will you be like, nah, from my perspective it was?
I cannot say right now because
the possibility is there that there's eventually a rule against it.
Well, this is first of all, it's not me. I mean, it's me, South Africa, and many others who have joined the South Africa proceedings, and hundreds of scholars worldwide, and dozens of universities who have already looked in. There is a network of American universities who has written a really significant report of one. I had 25 pages to fill, and I can tell you how much has been left out of that report, because there is a strict word count on my reports. But
really.
Yeah.
You only used to.
You're
only allowed to use 50,000 words or something?
10,700.
Why?
Because this is the word limit. You have no idea. No idea. It's been
Who limits that?
It's the UN rules, and the UN is
What?
it's very strict. It's more. It seems that there is a higher tolerance for at the UN level, for not conduct that is not in line with international law. That word count, breaches of word count limits. So again, many of us will have to come to terms with the fact that the ICJ concludes otherwise, and I will respect it. But I know what I know, and I have no doubts of what I'm saying, and it's painful. I mean, it's not that I feel proud of saying what I'm saying. It's awful. It's been awful to look into this.
I always ask my guests some personal questions.
Depends.
Well, I mean, nothing too personal, but like, how did you end up being a lawyer? And why did you get into international law and human rights?
Yeah, I had a call in life, but because I was very rebellious, I didn't want to do what my father had done, what my brother had done, so I didn't want to. But
what did they do?
Lawyers.
Corporate lawyers or something?
No, more civil and criminal law, both.
Why didn't you want to become like them?
Yeah, I didn't want to, because I didn't want to. Again, this is it's for another discussion. But I didn't want to. I had the world, and the world. I really wanted to. I just saw myself into the world, and I come from a very small country, and I grew up with my mom, and was very. I was not prepared to. This is why I would have never expected to do what I'm doing. But again, I was the person who would always step in if there was someone abusive toward someone else.
Even at school and college and all that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Even with I had zero tolerance for abusive conduct, and I mean people are abusing of vulnerable individuals. And eventually, I studied law because it gave me a sense of safety. It was a difficult time of my life. I lost my father very young, and eventually I said, okay, I do that because I sort of know it. It's a safe area. It's a safe space. And then I kept on having this goal that it was the right and the wrong thing at the same time, because I didn't want to work as a lawyer in Italy. I wanted to. I had this attraction for international law, and when I continued my studies, I did a master, and then I even started a PhD, and I haven't finished. But it's okay. This is not the drama. But
you're not a doctor. What is this?
No, when I studied. But I published my book meanwhile. Yeah, this is the crazy things of my life. But so when I finished my master in human rights, and I had studied imperialism, colonialism, and international law, so there was this third world approach to international law angle, and it was very, very clear what I was up to in life. That I had my call in life. There was being a lawyer, not as a barrister, as a solicitor, but advising on laws, on policies. I ended up in the UN, and this is what I was doing.
No regrets?
No. And then I knew that I would work on protection. I mean, still, for me, human rights work is a very noble and important work.
I mean,
including for free.
That's crazy. Like when I heard that you don't get any money.
No. But it's okay. I mean, I even wrote a book, and I could have got the money out of it. And I gave everything. I told the editor, give it to a charity, because I don't want to get a penny from this. And it bothers me right now.
I mean,
while people are being genocided.
We already established that you're a persona non grata in Israel. But what about the Palestinian side? Are they like, oh, there's Francesca coming, or like she wants to come, let's support her? Or is there also like pressure from like the PA, from Fatah, from Hamas? Like, do they like consider you as a friend, and then like, come on?
There is the PA is not a monolith. I know that I have a lot of respect. I mean, there are wonderful ambassadors who work for the Palestinian Authority, but I'm the first special rapporteur on the OPT because our mandate is to investigate Israel's violations of international law in the OPT, because the mandate was created when the PA was not there. So there has always been this thing, your mandate is to investigate Israel's violations. I'm the first special rapporteur who does write about violations committed by the Palestinian Authority and Hamas in
Although
in
it's
Gaza.
not your mandate.
It's my mandate because this is the way, and I said, this is the way I interpret my mandate. If you want to challenge me on that, fine. But let's discuss about that, because the Palestinian Authority was not there. Hamas was not there when the mandate was created. And the thing is that I look at human rights, and whomever actors has the capacity to have an impact on the human rights situation. Now, of course, the reality is such is that the primary responsible is Israel with the occupation it maintains. But to an extent, I mean, if you read my report on detention, I scrutinize and I condemn also the cooperation, the intelligence, the security cooperation that exists in the West Bank between the Israeli forces and the Palestinian security forces. I've spoken about this revolving door. Sometimes the Palestinian authorities, the Palestinian forces arrest people who are wanted by Israel. This is something that people need to understand. There is no one to protect the Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory. No one, because even the Palestinian security forces are there and within the limits of the Oslo Accords, which means granting and ensuring the security within the parameters of Israel. So it's the security of they would never. Have you ever seen the security forces taking a stand against the settlers or against the armed or against the soldiers? No, of course not, because this is not their job.
Have any of your views on Palestine and Israel changed since you've become the special rapporteur? Because,
Say it again.
Have your views on this whole conflict changed for the last couple of years compared to your views on Palestine the decades before?
Yeah. Well, I keep on learning. This is the thing, sometimes my husband asks me, "Well, are you never tired of reading?" Because I keep on buying books and reading other people's opinions, and so I could get, certain point fed up. No, I keep on studying. I keep on learning, and it's not that I've changed views. I understand better the nuances. The suffering on all sides in the story. This is something that was not that clear. It was less defined, less precise.
I mean, I hope you're going to come back someday, because I wanted to also talk to you about your first report you ever published, where you told the members of the United Nations you guys need to develop a plan to end the occupation and apartheid. And I think we have too little time to discuss it, because maybe you have an idea for a plan. Instead, what do you think of? Because I had many guests here, including like Henri Bohm. I don't know if you know him, like a philosopher.
Yes.
He calls for like a one-state solution, like Palestinians and Israelis in one state.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Look, the Israelis I know are all for this. The Israelis I know, very few.
So you know a lot of lefties.
I don't think it's lefties. It's people who have who see the harm of colonialism and want a decolonized Israel. They want us. They are in, and I think. I don't know if I will ever have the chance to see that place become the one place where both people are free, and I don't. It's hard. It's hard to imagine, but I
But
know that if it happens, it will be the most interesting place on earth because I again there is something so special about the Palestinians and the way they have adapted in life. They're so resilient, without overstating, without heroes.
Heroization?
Heroization. Bravo. Thank you. Without the heroization of their resilience. But again, and at the same time, I mean, even the Israelis, many of them have come through so much, including deconstructing what they knew, what they were taught, what they were told. And it would be such a beautiful place. I wish I had, after having invested, I became so entangled in the story of these two people, and I would love to see that place as a place of peace. But it sounds so naive today that I feel the cracks in my mouth as I say that.
I mean, we also collected some audience questions I'm going to ask you in a minute. I was wondering earlier, since you interview people in the Palestinian territories, do you also interview settlers? Are they willing to talk to you? Like Israeli settlers?
I've thought about that.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. I've thought about that. And people I trust advised me not to. But I remember, for example, when I was in it's not that even there. It's not that settlers are a monolith. So there are the settlers who are really the economic settlers. They don't even realize why they are a problem, because they don't even realize, because they don't understand that this is what occupied land means. Mm-hmm. So and then there are the extremist religious, for example, in Hebron. I mean, I'm someone who really used to talk to everyone when I was there, and including to settlers. In Hebron, it was very difficult. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they would. I mean, how would I do that now? I could try to have video conferences, but yeah, when it was a good opportunity could have been writing the report when I wrote the report on children. But I spoke
Can't you ask like Palestinian lawyers or Israeli lawyers to help you? And
Oh yeah. No, this is why I got a lot of information from them.
Mm. Well, these were my questions. Please come back at some point.
Of course.
We collected some audience questions. Since you mentioned that you're not being paid in your job, someone was wondering if you at least are granted diplomatic immunity. Yes,
I have privileges and immunities because it's, as I said, it's considered a very senior position at the UN level. So normally when we go to a country, we meet ministers or deputy ministers. So as such, we do have a status which is accompanied also by privileges and immunities. Because we need to be, we cannot be held accountable for actions or opinions expressed in the exercise of our mandate.
We also talked about the attacks on your person, like verbal attacks or on social media in the last couple of years. But are you physically in danger sometimes? Can you talk about that?
Well, let's say that this
threats?
This year has become some people have become a little bit nastier than before, but it is what it is. I'm not scared. Let's put it this way.
Then someone wants to know: have you ever, in your wildest dreams, thought that you'd be received like a rock star by students simply for properly doing your job as a UN rapporteur? The person says it happened at the university in Paris.
It has happened many times, I have to say. I have to share with our friend. No. But besides the reception and people applauding, is the fact that people rediscover trust in international law. Because again, the young generations understand human rights better than we do. It's not an abstraction. It's something very critical, very close to many of them. I don't want to romanticize, but most of the young people I've met in the dozens of universities I've visited in the last few months, I mean, they're so brave and so enlightened and so courageous. But more than anything else, they are knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they come back to me and they say, oh, you know, I mean, you're really giving me trust in the UN. You are really making me trust the UN system again. Just for that, I should be paid. I'm joking. But I wouldn't have even ever expected that.
Shadi wants to know, do you think that displaced Palestinians whose homes and land were confiscated should be compensated?
I think where in the OPT, in the occupied Palestinian territory,
Yes.
I think that the properties that are still standing, they should be returned to the original owners, and ways can be found. There can be. This is why there in the book I wrote about Palestinian refugees and international law for Oxford University Press, I discussed the fact that there should be a commission looking at all requests and all needs and all demands, but there is a need to acknowledge the past. You know, many Palestinians have settled elsewhere, but they still remain so Palestinian. They have this fracture inside themselves of this history of their families, their ancestors, their homeland completely squandered, and they need to reconcile with that. And so many of them might not even want to return to Palestine, but this cannot, to historical Palestine, I mean, call it Palestine, call it Israel, but they cannot be deprived of that right. As simple as that.
Someone was wondering if you're afraid of a second Trump presidency.
Yeah, I am.
Why?
Because this is not someone who respects, well, also the US administration doesn't respect international law much, but still cares for somewhat its national interests. There is a sense of respect for national domestic laws. I mean, President Trump has had an extremely dangerous sets of policies in the Middle East, and has also been considered particularly dangerous for its own nationals. I mean, for the U.S. citizens. So again, it's his own philosophy. He's racist, and he scares me. People like him scare me.
Same with Meloni?
Oh, I think not comparable with Trump.
No?
No. I mean, we can say a lot of bad things
Isn't she
about
like a
her party.
post-fascist?
Yeah, but Trump is another league.
I'm not that familiar with her. Personal question in the end from me. Imagine you had you get a 1-hour meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Oh, I have a lot of questions.
What would you talk to him about?
I would probably ask him if he has read any book written by Palestinians. I would ask him why has he done all what he has done as a prime minister. If he realizes what he has done to his country, to the people he feels like his own people, if he realized what he has led Israel to in the past 8 months, if he sees the wounds that he has inflicted to his own people, first and foremost. These are the questions I would ask. Probably he wouldn't. This is really, it would never happen.
Never say never.
Never say never. Yeah. No, I would ask not about international law, because it clearly it has never meant much to him. But yeah.
Francesca, thanks so much for being on the show.
That's cool.
Thank you. Very interesting. I hope our audience found it interesting as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the show.
But they've only seen my back.
No, they only see me right now since I'm talking to them.
Sorry.
But they've been seeing you for 99% of the time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the show. Without your support, this wouldn't be possible. We don't rely on advertising and all this. So thanks for that. See you tomorrow. Bye, Francesca. Bye.
Thank you.